Good evening, everyone. At this time, I'd like to, we have to open our meeting technically, so I would like to call to order the meeting of the Planning Board for Wednesday, November 15th at, I believe it's 7 o'clock now. So in doing that, apparently we also have a number of members of the Open Space Committee here as well who would need to open their meeting. So Kathy, if you would like to do that.
Yes, I'd like to open the Open Space Committee for November 15th at 7.
Okay, so we have two groups and our meetings are open. Okay, so at this point, usually our first thing we have on our agenda is an open forum, but I don't see that as being something necessarily we need to do this evening because we would like to get right into Josh and the full presentation we have for the evening. So Josh, if you'd take us away.
I'm Emma, not Josh. Josh will be coming on later. Thank you so much for the introductions. So welcome everybody. This is the first public meeting of the Duxbury Comprehensive Master Plan, which we are calling Envision Duxbury. And today we'll just start out with some welcome and introductions. We'll give an overview of what a master plan is, what that process is looking like for us. We'll go into a summary of the elements we're covering in the first phase of the master plan, which is housing, open space and recreation, and historic and cultural resources. And then we will break out into our open house for activities. So Scott, thank you for introducing. If everyone on the planning board wants to just maybe stand up and raise your hand. They're all in the front. So the planning board is the official committee of the master plan. So just wanted to introduce them again. I also want to thank them for the work that they've been doing on this project. We presented before the planning board last month. We got great input, which we've then incorporated into this presentation. I also want to thank the town planning department. So Valerie Massard, director of planning, and Diane Grant. And from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, I'm Emma Schnur. I'm a regional land use planner, and I'm the sub-regional coordinator for the South Shore. We're joined by Josh Fiala, who's a senior land use planner, Anna Singupta, who is an arts and culture planner, Darcy Schofield, who is a senior environmental planner, and Carolina Prieto, who is a community engagement specialist. Okay, so why are we here tonight? We are here to tell you a little bit about what we've been up to for the last couple months, present the results of the tremendously successful community survey, to present the initial findings from the phase 1 elements that I mentioned, and to most importantly, to invite your feedback. So a master plan, it can mean a lot of different things, but the definition that we're going with is a master plan is a strategic framework that guides the future physical and economic development of a city or town based on the community's vision and goals. And what that means is a whole process to help the town create a vision for its future, to create goals and strategies to capitalize on opportunities which are realized based on extensive existing conditions research and also public input. And then lastly, a detailed action plan for positive change. And so these are the traditional elements in a master plan. And as I sort of mentioned, in phase 1, we're covering Duxbury today, the vision, housing, historic and cultural resources, and open space, and these other elements we'll be covering in our second phase. So just to give you a little bit of idea about the timeline, the first phase will end this summer, in summer 2018, following an update at town meeting in March, and then the second phase will run until summer 2019, and will include 2 additional public meetings. And so just to give you an idea of the information that's presented for you tonight, everything that sort of is coming forward with this whole plan. So phase 1 elements we'll be focusing on today, again, housing, open space, and historic and cultural resources. But very important are all our phase 2 elements. So economic development, transportation and circulation, public services and facilities, sustainability, including climate and energy, and land use and zoning. And all of these maps are throughout the room, so if you have comments on elements that we'll be covering in phase 2 that we won't really go into detail on today, we want to give you opportunity to leave comments about that if you have something you want to share. The Duxbury Today section is essentially the element of the plan that explores Duxbury's location and regional context, the government structure, population characteristics, such as these here in front of you, and also on more boards that are out in the hallway. And it will also discuss recent planning initiatives. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh, who will explain the community process.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Planning Board, and thank you all for having us. Good evening. So this Envision Duxbury process is your plan. So we're here from MAPC to help facilitate this process. We bring certain technical capabilities and expertise with us, but really what we're trying to do is unlock your shared community vision for what you see the future of Duxbury being in the next 15 to 20 years. And we've built into this process several features, including events like this, the forum, but also things like the community survey to engage as many people in Duxbury as possible and to get people to come together around the themes of the master plan and to help us learn enough from you to determine goals, strategies, and policies which can direct implementation in the town in the future coming years. So as a part of the community engagement, we also have what we're calling in this process master plan ambassadors. And if you are a master plan ambassador, maybe if you could just indulge me with a wave in the crowd. We have several here tonight. So these are community members who have been involved in volunteering with the town, perhaps working with the Open Space Committee or the Historic Committee or others that are dedicating their volunteer time to help us get the word out about the survey, which they did great helping with that. We got a tremendous amount of response. And then helping us throughout the process with meetings like this. So if you want to engage with a resident instead of a regional planner, you can do that this evening. And you can catch them at the supermarket or the downtown shops as you're going about your days and talk about where this process is if you're wondering.
Josh, will you give me a hand?
Yes. So thank you all, Master Plan Ambassadors. We're very thankful for the work you've already put in, and we look forward to working with you more as this process continues. So with that, the community survey, which I imagine many of you in the room have participated in, was a tremendous success. It was, I'm starting an unsubstantiated rumor this evening, but I think it was the largest survey response that we've ever received as a planning agency. The last I heard was... But I had heard about Natick. We had done a similar process in a similar survey, and they had around 800 responses. And I think we're at about 1,240 in the end here, so that's an amazing feat. So you'll see the responses, those survey responses tabulated out in the hallway, and please take a look through and help us interpret what you think that means this evening as you engage with the exercises. And also, just to let you know, that's of the over 20 people over the age of 20, that's about 10% of the overall population of Duxbury. So 1 in 10 people have engaged with that survey, which is a very strong foundation for this effort as we move forward. So based upon the preliminary work, including that survey and those results, and the preliminary work we've done in each of the elements of the master plan, including housing, historic and cultural resources, and open space and recreation, we have drafted a vision statement, which you'll have an eye test right now and try to read through it all. Just kidding. So we've got this vision statement on boards in the back of the room, and we'll invite you to take a look at it and help us make it better, wordsmith on it. We'll also post it online on the website for the project, and it will evolve over the next few months as we learn more and you provide your feedback on it. And it's always easier to refine things from a starting point, so this is that starting point of a vision statement, and we bring it forward this evening. So, as Emma laid out, there are many elements which are involved in a comprehensive master plan. It tries to be very comprehensive in nature. And we've broken it into two phases. The first phase that we're looking at focuses on three of those elements: housing, open space and recreation, and historic and cultural resources. We're going to do a brief presentation on those three elements now and get you acquainted with the information. And then we have in the other room, in the setter room, engagement exercises which are focused on creating feedback from you all around those three elements. So getting into housing, these are the characteristics of the housing element that we're looking at. A housing needs assessment, looking at the demographics, the characteristics of the housing stock, the affordability, constraints for future housing, and then also thinking about the community goals and strategies which will come along as a part of that element. Overall, the demographics in the town, the population is growing, but at a slower rate as compared to previous years, particularly the peak in the 1970s, when you can see the population was growing at a rate of about 55%. It's now slowed to between 3 and 6%. The population is growing older, with growth in the 35 to 64 and 65 plus categories the strongest, in the 65 plus category in the 80% increase, which is the most substantial, and a decline in the population between 25 and 34 in that age cohort. We see households mirroring those general demographics, and household growth was about 8% over the last 10 plus years. And the growth in the households is also in the older cohorts, with those projections holding steady into the future, according to MAPC's population projections in the region. That 8% growth of households was not even across the town. And if you break the town into three sub-areas, the southeast saw the largest increase in households, particularly with projects like the Island Creek Village, Duxbury Woods, which had quite a few housing units involved. The households are mostly families, and so the householders are related to each other in 78% of the households in the town. Household size is high relative to other communities in the region and even the neighboring communities that are listed here, but it has been declining over the last decade or so, coming down from closer to 3 down to 2.81. The housing stock in the community is predominantly single-family homes. 89% are single-family homes. Other units include two-family homes, and they go up in density to multifamily at the top. But again, that mix from two-family up to a multifamily like the Island Creek Village accounts for only about 11% of the units in the town. And you can see that distribution in this map here. And this map is repeated in a few of the housing exercises as well. So you can see some of the patterns. The red are higher density housing types. The orange is the single family, which is the 89%. These single family homes are predominantly owned and have a relatively low vacancy rate, around 2%. The median household income in the community is $120,000, and the distribution of the income you can see in this chart here, where almost 60% of the community has a household income of $100,000 or more. 30% of the households earn less than $74,000 annually. as in all of the metropolitan area communities, housing prices are continuing to rise. The median sales price today is $575. And I'm sure if you run these numbers in 2017, it would be even higher.
It is, today's paper came out today, it's over 600.
That's all right. So that trend continues upward. And you see similar trend in terms of rentals, and this is fair market rents across the size of the unit, so efficiency up to 4-bedroom, and then each of the bars are a year from 2011 to 2016, and each of those bars are growing each year. With the most growth in the largest units, so 3 and 4 bedrooms are seeing the largest increase in pricing. Studio apartments are relatively even. In 1 bedrooms, you can see the rise as they go up. So about 15% of all households pay between 30 and 50% of their monthly income toward housing costs. And housing costs could be a mortgage or it could be rent, and it includes taxes, insurance, and utilities. So it's all of those, the lump of housing costs. And that's the Housing and Urban Development, the HUD guidelines state that anything over 30% is considered cost burdens. So it's difficult within a monthly household budget to pay for other things like transportation, food, clothing, et cetera. The average single-family home tax bill, and this was from a recently released tax information sheet from the town, is projected to be over $10,000. And the town is below the 10% benchmarks for affordability in the town, which makes it susceptible to 40B development projects. So one of the considerations for housing, of course, is to counteract all of those trends in terms of rising costs and rising rents. The supply of housing is one approach to looking at that. So we'll also be looking at and considering development constraints for housing in the town and the types of issues that might be limiting supply in the future, and strategies which we can work with you all about how to think about all of those housing issues and what the puzzle looks like for Duxbury. So open space and conservation, which Emma's going to get into, access to municipal water services, sewer services, and then also allocation of CPA funds, which are on the low end of the range, which they're allowed to be, and special permits being required for anything other than a single-family home, which creates some permitting hurdles as well. So that's just a flavor of the housing considerations, and we do have some additional housing information in the other room to invite your feedback on all of that. So thank you very much.
Hi. So Duxbury is, as everyone knows, an absolutely beautiful community, and it really does have a diversity of resource types, but that also means that they have different users, both human and non-human, also different opportunities and needs. Resources like the beach and the bay, state-of-the-art facilities, like the new turf field near the high school, really do draw people to town, both people who want to live here, but also visitors. And there generally is a strong interest in land preservation amongst community members. 75% of the survey respondents said that open space and natural resources are one of the most important community values, and that came in only after schools. So clearly it's something that's very much cherished in town. And traditionally, historically, protection of Duxbury's aquifer has been the primary rationale behind open space planning, but obviously it's done for a variety of other reasons, and for many important reasons. So this map just shows the distribution of open space throughout Duxbury. You could see there's a lot of it. Obviously there's the beach, the marsh, the green belt system of large contiguous tracts of protected land, like the North Hill Marsh. So it's really an area that's also connected by the Bay Circuit Trail, which connects Bay Farm and Duxbury. Technically could connect all the way up to Newburyport on the North Shore. And so Duxbury Beach, that's one of those major resource areas we're talking about. And 83% of people said that beaches are what people like the most about Duxbury. It came in number 1. And Duxbury Beach, obviously it's a recreational amenity, but it also has an ecological function. It serves as the protective barrier for Duxbury, Plymouth, and Kingston Bays. It has a variety of recreational activities from walking, jogging, swimming, shell and fin fishing. According to the state, it's a high priority site for the protection of piping plovers, least terns, and Arctic terns. Here you could see some people out on the beach. You probably recognize the areas. And so obviously it's also a fragile ecosystem. There is damage to the dune structure during storms, issues related to overcrowding, and in terms of damage to dune structures, Duxbury Beach Reservation is undertaking a fundraising campaign actually to elevate the height of the sacrificial dune to preserve that resource moving forward. Duxbury Bay is another one of those highly cherished resource areas in town. Almost 60% of survey respondents said that the bay is one of the things they like most about Duxbury. There's extensive programming at the bay put on by the Duxbury Bay Maritime School and the Yacht Club, such as opening of the bay and the classic boat weekend. Obviously recreational activities like boating, swimming, windsurfing, fishing, waterfowl hunting in the winter. And there's also a recreational and commercial shellfish industry, and 82 acres of tidal flats are leased yearly for shellfish farming. In fiscal year 2015, 1,349 recreational permits were sold and 66 commercial licenses. And it's not really something that the town receives a whole bunch of money from. It's more that the town is really happy to have those shellfish fishermen here. And one ecological issue of note in Duxbury Bay is the loss of eelgrass beds due to severe storms, boats, and water quality. And that's something we'll explore more in our sustainability section. And we'll also have one of our colleagues is here working on a climate vulnerability plan. So she'll be able to engage you on some of that material when we break out into the open house. Duxbury's Conservation Commission is very active. It began an aggressive land acquisition campaign around in the 1960s, and today manages nearly 3,000 acres of protected open space, and hundreds of those acres are permanently protected with either conservation or agricultural restrictions. The agricultural restriction is on the historic O'Neill Farm, which is the oldest operating dairy farm on the South Shore. And some of the open spaces have trails, such as the North Hill Marsh and Wildlife Sanctuary and around the Cranberry Bogs. And Duxbury was one of the first towns in Southeast Massachusetts to purchase bogs and preserve them for their active uses. And this map just shows a few habitat features of Duxbury. Many areas include rare species, including all of Duxbury Bay, and as mentioned, Duxbury Beach is a high priority site for species protection. There are also a number of recreational facilities like playgrounds, fields, and courts. There was less strong of a response on the survey for this than for open space and natural resources. Could also have to do with who took the survey. Some of those active recreation facilities are more utilized by younger people. And there are new athletic facilities on St. George Street at the former high school site, which were completed around 2014. The recreational facilities are managed by the school Public Works and Recreation Department. And the Recreation Department also runs a variety of programming for residents of all ages. And the turf field and others are well maintained and are heavily used. And then lastly, just to identify some of the challenges related to open space and recreation. These are things we'll be trying to engage you on during the open house and also as we move forward in this process. Obviously, flooding and sea level rise is a major concern. This will be covered in more detail in phase 2 and at Darcy's station, but it's obviously a big concern and relates to open space. Also, the loss of beaches due to storm erosion, contamination to the drinking water supply, either from septic systems or saltwater intrusion. Some other things are development around wetlands and waterfronts, waterfront access in general, resident, non-resident use of sites related to overcrowding. And then one thing that we really heard loud and clear in the survey is the lack of bike and pedestrian connectivity. 50% of survey respondents identified transportation options as a major challenge. It was the biggest challenge, and 83% of people agree that improving sidewalks and creating multi-use path systems is important to meet the needs of people walking and biking in Duxbury. And when we asked people what their good idea for Duxbury was, by far the most people said sidewalks. So just something to leave you on as we move into the historic and cultural resources element.
Thanks, Emma. I am going to talk to you a little bit about the historic and cultural resources element of the master plan. This has been an incredibly fun opportunity for me because there is just such an abundance of resources here, and the history of Duxbury is so tightly intertwined with the history of actually conservation and preservation. Many of the resources have conservation land near them or around them, and so all of these elements are actually very tightly interwoven. And I'm very excited for the master planning process to give us an opportunity to think about how to strengthen those resources and use the resources to strengthen all of these other elements of planning that are going on at the same time. I think that the survey shows that there is a strong contingent of the population that is really valuing the historic character of the town. Over 30% of respondents identified the historic character as the most important thing that they value in the town, or one of the 6 most important things. And there is going to be a historic preservation plan underway. So I think that the focus that we're going to use in the master planning effort is to try to contextualize the preservation in terms of overall town goals and priorities to help set that historic preservation plan up for success, frame the preservation planning effort in terms of those priorities, and also provide a starting point of overview of some of the tools and strategies that can be integrated into the existing strategies that are being used in the town today. Some of the work I've done is just trying to understand the long history of this town. It goes back all the way to the colonial era. There are beautifully preserved assets that tell the story of the history of this town and the history of our country. And I think I understand why there is a real desire to preserve that, because it is an amazing set of assets. And, there were over 750 resources already in the inventory that's run by the Massachusetts Historical Commission. So people have actively been identifying and documenting the buildings and structures that they believe have historic value and importance. And some of those are part of the old shipbuilders historic district that is along the coast, along Washington Street. So this is the map of all of those. And you can see there's a real concentration of them along the shoreline. But there are clusters that are in all different parts of the town. The yellow dots show where you have your local historic districts and resources that have preservation restrictions attached to them. So you'll notice that of all of those resources, there are actually very few that have preservation restrictions on them. So they may have historic designation, they may be part of the National Historic District, they may have been inventoried, but there hasn't been any regulatory or deed restriction that helps keep them preserved in perpetuity. There are lots of different strategies. Duxbury is using a lot of them. We have the local demolition delay bylaw. You have the historic properties that are owned by the town and maintained through as public facilities. You also have nonprofit organizations owning and managing these historic properties. You have some beautiful historic homes that are museums run by the Duxbury Rural and Historical Society. You have the John and Priscilla Alden family sites, and a few others. You have the historic O'Neill Farm which is preserved through the land trust conservation restrictions that Emma mentioned before. And one of the things I think is really remarkable about Duxbury is that you have preserved uses as well as buildings. So you have these agricultural uses, you have the bogs, you have maritime uses, and so you actually have been able to preserve the character as a living history and not only as a structure of buildings. And I hope that as part of this master plan, we can really think about how to plan for that, the continuance of that in a really rich way. So this is just highlighting that the designations don't come with preservation restrictions attached to them, and that but they do indicate national historic significance or local historic significance, so they can help with identifying those properties that really do need some extra help for preservation. And so I think this is where the historic preservation plan will come in to get a little bit more clear about which of those 750 properties are contributing the most, that have the most local significance, are really important to preserving the historic character of the town, and which of them, maybe because of additions that have been put on, may have lost some of their historic character. And then I also want to introduce some of the other opportunities that there are to promote historic preservation. Some of these have been, are being used by other towns in the region. You have historical commissions with websites that have detailed information about how private homeowners can do preservation on their own and encourage that through dissemination of information. You also have preservation awards that are awarded at a local level. You have Arlington actually gives out preservation loans to help homeowners do the preservation work. And then Hingham has historic house tours that really highlight the best of their preserved assets without them having to be owned by a nonprofit or by the town itself. And then there are also some zoning bylaw work that can be done to think about providing some density incentives if you preserve really key buildings. And then we can talk more about this in the open house, but I've been looking at where there might be some clusters of assets that can be strengthened through things like sidewalks or other types of connections, through thinking about how all of those resources function together. We're in one of those clusters right now. This area where you have the library, the middle school and high school, you have it's close to the Ellison Center for the Arts, the Art Complex Museum, the John Alden House. It's this site that's just rich with history, with public resources, with open space, and I think it's worth exploring how a master plan can really strengthen that. And then another location is near the O'Neill Farm, where you have the Cranberry Bogs, the Tree of Knowledge, the Chandler School, the village at Duxbury, some of the walking trails, and thinking about that's a very different character, but it's a site that's really preserving a lot of those old historic uses that blend history and open space and built facilities. And this may be a place where more intensive inventorying of the properties would be appropriate, and thinking about how to build stronger connections with it. So these are the next steps. I hope you come and visit the posters out in the next room after the presentation is over, and I'd love to talk to you more about this. Thanks.
Thank you, Annis. So thank you for coming this evening, listening to the introduction to the Envision Duxbury Master Plan process, and to hear and learn more about the three elements which are the focus of Phase 1. We've done enough talking. We want to do some listening now, and we have two things we want to do with listening. First, we invite you, if you have either clarifying questions or questions you'd like to have within the entire audience, we'll have a few minutes, maybe no more than 10, hopefully, 10 minutes, if we can fit it within that. If you do have a question, we ask that you come to one of the microphones on the side and introduce yourself, just so that we can know who you are, and so that you can be recorded for the cable television rebroadcast of this event. And then the other thing we'd like to do in terms of listening is invite you to engage with us in the open house setting. Hopefully you each have a agenda. On the back of that agenda are some prompting questions. Feel free to follow along, or just let us know what's on your mind, and let us know what you want us to know for this process. And then there are also in this room and in the Setter room across the hall, about 20 boards, which we put together around the master plan generally, but also the focused elements that we're talking about. And we'd invite you to engage with those boards. And please, there's dot voting exercises, so please stick dots as appropriately. And there's also Post-it notes and pens everywhere. And we'd invite you, if you have something you'd like us to know, just write it on a Post-it and stick it up there, because otherwise it's hard for us to keep track of conversations that have occurred in the room unless we get them in writing. So that would be very helpful for us as we get back to the office. Just to give you a lay of the land for the open house. So in the front, we have all the elements of the master plan process. So if you really have something to say about municipal facilities or transportation and circulation, and that's not one of the phase 1 focuses, please put that up here. We'll get to it in phase 2. In the back of the room, we have some recapping of the 1999 comp plan and the goals and objectives which were a part of that plan, to see if any of that resonates and is still kind of chugging along as ideas. In the other room, we have the 3 focuses of the topics which we've presented, but also we have Darcy Schofield from MAPC also, who's doing a parallel process for the climate mitigation and vulnerability assessment. And we also have in the back next to the 1999 comp plan a review of Hall's Corner recent economic development processes which have occurred, and a question about rezoning in Hall's Corner and if that should proceed on a faster timeline than our methodical process for the master plan overall. So with that, I invite anyone who has a question in this setting to please stand up to the microphone and ask. If not, we can, oh, sure.
What was the proposed zoning for Hall's Corner?
The proposed zoning for Hall's Corner is actually outlined in the board. It was to enhance mixed-use development in Hall's Corner, thinking about the potential for, I think, like an additional floor of height in Hall's Corner, and mixing of residential and business uses there.
Wasn't there also supposed to be a new traffic plan for that area?
That
We've never seen anything else.
That was also a study in 2014 by Old Colony Planning, and they had proposed some traffic improvements to the roundabout there.
But where does that go? I used to live there, that's why I was curious. What
If
happened?
I may, that information, so that's, all of that information is available here in the back for you to take a look at, and we want everybody to revisit that if they're not familiar with it. But all of the conclusions and the results of those studies are here, right that in that corner. Right, as soon as we break the group up to go, that's exactly where, and we have some folks here who were really closely involved in that study that will be there to answer questions too. So, yep.
Valerie, aren't they online as well?
Yes, the studies are available online, and the reason I'm stepping up to the microphone, I'm Valerie Massard, I'm the planning director for the town. I'm working closely with all of these folks, both on the comprehensive plan, but also on the climate resiliency plan, on Hall's Corner, and any of the other dimensionals discussions you see here tonight. I'm involved in that in some way. But what I want to get through to the audience who may not be here tonight is that all of this information, this will be broadcast on PACTV. We're going to have, we have it, what's called an Envision Duxbury tab on the main website. If you go to the town's website, right in the very top of the website, there's a tab for you to hit that takes you right to the web page where we're keeping all of this information and all of the updates as we proceed. You're always welcome to enter your email address and we'll send you updates. And I welcome folks who want to talk to me personally to set up a meeting with me in the planning office or out for coffee is one of my favorite things. But I just wanted to share that with the televised audience, and then I'm going to step back to Josh.
Valerie, is that the main way you want us to interact with the process, is call you?
Well, what's your preference is what I say. If you'd like to talk with me, that's great. If you want
A
to,
lot of good information.
Yeah.
How do we dialogue?
well, we're trying to do all of it. Have it on the webpage for you to do that. Interact with the ambassadors if you're not able to come to town hall during regular business hours, but you see folks who raised their hand earlier commonly throughout the community. give them a call. They're here to help make that happen, so there's a connection between us and everybody else who has very busy lives.
That's you and the ambassador.
Or the planning board members themselves, your elected officials. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Josh.
Yeah, I will point out too that unfortunately we should have put it more prominently on these slides, but on the handout you have the website for the project is envisionduxbury.mapc.org, and you should go there. All of the information we've presented tonight, both in the presentation and on the boards, will be posted online. People are welcome to download that information, engage with it, email any member of the project team, and get in touch with us. We'll be responsive and receptive to any of those. And even if you email someone and it's not to necessarily the right person, then we'll make sure that channeling occurs. So
The emails are on the website.
yes, we'll make sure that all of our contact information is on the website if it isn't. So it's good. Yes, if you wouldn't mind, I know it's a little difficult, but I've been instructed. It really helps. We've been pushed about concerns about sound quality for our home audience.
So it would seem that a community should have a certain balance of young people and young families, empty nesters, and old folks like me. So I wondered if in your experience you've come across studies that would show for a town of our size and our location, our makeup, is there an ideal, a golden mean?
For mix of population?
Yes.
I don't know of a specific percentage range of mix of population, but I think that your thought in terms of there being a mix is right, and that there does need to be a balance among the age cohorts so that a population isn't getting overly biased towards one age group or another. I think that what the demographics we presented are revealing is that it's the younger cohorts which are in imbalance or potentially at risk of being imbalanced in Duxbury today. And that from our perspective, the initial analysis looks like it's pointing at things like affordability potentially, or like walkability, which are buzzwords for millennials. I think that if you can capture young people with a simple word, which is not possible, but I think things like active and mixed use and vibrant centers that are walkable are things we're hearing all across the region that are attracting young people to want to live there, combined with places that are affordable. Of course, those two aren't necessarily, they're difficult to achieve together because those types of places are very desirable, and desirability is oftentimes the flip side of the coin with affordability. So there's not a perfect recipe for that, but I think those gives you a hint of maybe where we see this heading. Any other questions in the same? So we will, our whole team, including planning board members, ambassadors, and others, will all be circulating. If you have a question for one of us, please seek us out, and please do try to get as much information onto boards, however you can, markers, Post-its, dots. We appreciate your coming tonight, and we hope that you all stay engaged with the process. Thank you.